heard from a friend of mine about a friend of hers that was going through a really rough time. And I know this is a common problem. A lot of us come here and talk about this issue, that we have someone that we know, we love, or maybe even someone we don't know that well, but we at least feel concerned about them. Maybe they're at church or in a community or somewhere in our life, and we see somebody that we know, and they're going through a rough patch. And we start to listen to them, and as we're listening to them, we begin to feel overwhelmed by what we're hearing. We don't know what to say. It feels details are maybe more than we're comfortable with. We begin to feel awkward. And if you're like me, I feel kind of stupid. I feel powerless. Sometimes I even feel emotionally flooded. I feel completely dumbfounded and know what to speak. And this is a time when a lot of us get in trouble and we do something that ends up being awkward, making the situation worse, and probably leaving our friends in a worse position than when we found them. A lot of us don't know what to do when we encounter someone who's in a traumatic experience, like coming out of or being in the midst of narcissistic abuse. And particularly when we meet somebody that is in an ongoing situation that we know that the simplest solution would be just to leave, or to set a better boundary, or to stop trying to engage, rescue, help, or whatever the person's doing with the toxic person in their life. We know what they should be doing that they're not doing, which even lends a greater level of frustration. Some have begun to call this trauma dumping. Now, I don't like the term. I think that's poorly captures it. They're not trying to dump on you. They certainly don't mean to. So I thought that we would start today talking about what to do instead. I know maybe you've been in this position, that you've been the one that you've had friends turn you away. I know that even if you've not been the one, there's a lot of times that you have encountered this and struggled to know what to do. So let's pause for a second and actually process what's going on with this individual. So take it out of the context of abuse, because that's such a loaded situation. Let's use a less loaded topic. Let's imagine, for example, the person survived an airplane crash. Let's make it really dramatic. They survived an airplane crash. They've come home and they're all, in a tizzy about it. They can't believe this happened. Well, when you go through an event like that, the first stage that you begin to experience psychologically and physiologically is shock. Part of it is your brain really hasn't caught up with what happened. So you're trying to establish that it was real, that it was that bad, and that you survived it. You're trying to make pieces. You're piecing the event together into some semblance of a story. You're trying to make it valid and real, and understand your emotional reaction. You don't even often, if you recollect something you've gone through that's really big, you don't even know what you feel because you're in the throes of it and you're surviving. All you're focusing on is, like, if you're in a plane, how do you get the hell out of the seat? How do you get out before it starts burning? You're focused on surviving. So now you're post the event and you're trying to know, like, wow, I was scared. I didn't know. I was confused. You have all this gamut of emotions from that event. So you're processing all of that. The other thing that you're looking for is validity of its horrificness. You want people around you to say, yes, that I can't believe you survived it too. You look for people to allow you to repeat it, and it makes it more real. And as you do this, as you kind of process, and you'll go over, I don't know how many times, 10, 100, 1,000 times, you'll retell this story. It begins to become part of your narrative, part of you and your history. And you begin to make sense in it. You're integrating it into your whole life story. That's what's happening. You're integrating it into your whole life story. And then you're beginning to make sense of it. What you did, why you did what you did, whether or not you would do it again. You sort of you think through the whole thing and you're making sense of the conclusions you meant and the actions that you meant. That's how we process a traumatic event. So what happens when it is an abusive event? And especially when it's a chronically abusive event, like they're in a toxic marriage, or they're having one of their children is hurting them, or say that they are coming out of a home and still having to deal with adult parents, and they're now adults and the parents are highly conflictual. And they process this with us. only there's no change that happens. We just hear the ongoing pain of this individual's life, what's happening with them. And they don't make changes, but they're just kind of processing this. And then those are the times where it becomes very clear. It becomes very clear when it's like a airplane accident. That event is done and over and you move on. But when it's an ongoing situation, what do? What happened? And often people don't even know what to do, because there's another piece with abuse that makes it very, very tricky, and that is called cognitive dissonance. I know if you're familiar with my platform, you know that I'm talking about it a lot because I'm about ready to launch an online course about it. What happens with cognitive dissonance is you don't know what's real. You live in two realities at the same time simultaneously. You're living in the reality of, I think the person I'm in a relationship with is a good person, whether, like I said, a family member, partner, neighbor, coworker, or whoever it may be. And at the same time, this person that you hope, think, sometimes acts like a good person also does terribly abusive things that only enemies do, only cruel people do. So they're living in this reality of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Ms. Hyde, and they don't know which one they're going to be with in any given moment. And as a result, they end up not being able to validate reality because they can't settle on what the reality is. At least with an airplane crash, you can say, well, there's news reports, I saw the debris field, people died, we went to a funeral. There's all this evidence that you went through something traumatic. And when it's an abusive, particularly emotionally abusive relationship, you don't get the benefit of all this evidence that suggests that this is really that bad. So you as a friend are listening to this and you're not seeing them take any actions. You're seeing them paralyzed with indecisiveness. But yet it continues to move over. You hear this over and over and over. You hear this same story over and over. And at some point, if you're like me, and I know that many of you have expressed this, so I know a lot of us struggle with this, you begin to what to do. In fact, it starts to make you sick. You start to feel, I know for me, I get headachy. My shoulders get tight. My jaw gets tight. I feel irritable. I'm kind of pissy with them. I start to want to blame them. I mean, come on, dumbass, make some decisions. Just get out of this. Things would be better. I start to feel sort of this, and even as a therapist, by the way, just because this happens to you socially does not mean that therapists, clinicians don't feel the same way. We do. I mean, what you're feeling is the person is partly trying to establish what's happening is real. So I want to stop and give us some suggestions. Before I do that, before I launch into what to do if you've encountered this situation, let me introduce myself, kind of talk about the rules of the room, and then we'll talk more about this. And then after that, I'll take your questions, or I'll take your questions during the midst of this. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a mental health clinician, and I have over 20 years of counseling experience. These days, I'm also a narcissistic abuse survivor. These days, I primarily offer education. I'm also a writer and do a lot of video work, educational work. As I said, I'm about ready to launch an online course called First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist. That's going to be available for the public on November 1st. It includes a workbook and an online course part, and then also a community group component as well. So thank you for joining me here today. I thank you for these lives. I love to spend time with you guys. I have a couple rules of the room. Please don't talk about my appearance. And I know I've been changing things up lately and changing my wig. And today I'm a short-haired auburn. And yes, short hair does sort of suit me. I'm one of these people I can wear a hat, and I have a face that sort of like is a good shape. You know, it takes a lot of different looks. So yes, it's fun. I was blonde on Tuesday. Today I'm redhead. You'll see me go back to brunette too. I'm just having a lot of fun with it. But it's awkward. I don't know what to say when people say something to me. And plus, I really want this platform to be about mental health. So let's keep it there. But thank you guys for the compliments. I appreciate that. And we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion, not because those things aren't great things to talk about, and not because they don't intersect into mental health. They certainly do. We know that they do. But I just want to keep this to be a safe place. And Instagram, I know you've suffered for nearly over a week with not being able to see your comments and taking any questions from you. I can see you now clearly. I have the ability to read your comments just like I'm reading TikTok. So I'm streaming live right now, both on Instagram and on TikTok, and I can see both of you. I want to let you know that on Tuesday, it's just in lieu of me talking alone, I'm going to be joined on both Instagram and TikTok with Ben Taylor, Raw Motivation, and I are going to be doing a joint live together. We're going to be talking about the mind. How could someone do this to me? An inside look at a narcissist mind. So if you have questions about why do narcissists do what they do, what are they thinking, are they aware, do they mean what they do, all of that stuff on Tuesday, Ben and I are going to be taking those questions. We're going to take an inside look at a narcissistic mentality, framework, mindset, relationship habits, all that stuff, all the nitty gritty stuff that we find so frustrating and makes absolute no sense to us. So I hope you'll join me on Tuesday at 1 p.m. to hear more about that. Hey, Chris, so good to see you. So with that said, let me go back. Let's talk about what to do if you have a friend who's going through something traumatic. Maybe it's been a long-standing toxic relationship. You're feeling burnt out. Maybe to you, it's starting to feel like trauma dumping. You're getting to the end point of yourself and you really don't know what else to do. So let's talk about what we can do that's really, really helpful. The first thing to remember is I said in the first part of describing what happens after a traumatic event is that the person that you're listening to is in a state of shock. Yes, states of shock can go on for very long periods of time. It can go on for weeks, months, and years. Partly because and those who've not been in a traumatic, narcissistic, abusive relationship may not know this, but narcissistically abusive people often do series of betrayals. So you don't get over a bad hump. You keep discovering more bad things. There's usually initial massive discovery, a massive betrayal that it just is shattering to the relationship, shattering to the sense of the person who's with this person, making you question if you really know who you're in a relationship with. So there's usually this massive betrayal, but it doesn't stop there. There ends up being a series of ongoing betrayals that continue to happen. That certainly happened for me. There was the massive betrayal, finding out he'd been cheating, and then I kept finding he was texting and making phone calls, and he promised that he wouldn't do it, and then there would be an email, and you keep finding it's what we often call a trickle out discovery. There's a trickle of discovery. So there's the betrayal goes and goes and goes, and what you discover about this person is you thought you knew the worst parts of them. You think the massive betrayal. Now you know the worst and you know everything there is. They even tell you, yes, you know everything that there is. And you discover that there is more sides to this. It's more complicated. It's often way, way worse, much deeper, that you only know the tip of the iceberg as time continues to uncover the worsening experience. So what you're hearing from this person isn't a one-time event. You're hearing from your friend or your loved one or your neighbor or whoever that there being a series of discoveries, a series of betrayals that re-injures them over and over and over. And so that's why the trauma continues to go on perpetually, is because they continue to be in a state of shock because of the worsening discoveries that continue to make them aware that they don't know this person and they're overwhelmed, frightened, and just floored. So that's the first problem, is that you're seeing someone who's in a perpetual state of reoccurring trauma. But we often know the best things that would help them is to get out. I knew that. I was told that within 3 or 4 months of the marriage, that I only knew the tip of the, I was told I only knew the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot more that I don't yet know. I didn't want to believe them. And by the way, I fired 2 therapists. Both therapists were indicating to me that my partner was not investing in the relationship, was not in it in the way that I thought, and that I was not emotionally safe. And instead of being able to take action, I fired them. Now, why would I do that? Why do people in your life do that? And this is the hard part. You may be trying to give them helpful information, but chances are your efforts to aid them are being rebuffed. Well, it has to do with the readiness, and it also has to do with the circumstances. Yeah, someone just said it's denial. It may be denial, their inability or refusal to see what's true. That may be true, but I think it's more complicated than denial. Partly was some denial on my part. I didn't want to admit that maybe I didn't know the person I married. Maybe this person wasn't a good guy. But it was also that there was a whole lot more going on. And part of it for at least for me, and as I listen to victims, I hear the same thing, is that they're creating a false reality. So you don't know. They really do. As I put out in this video just yesterday about boundaries, you say 10 o'clock, don't text me after 10 o'clock, and they'll text you at 10:01. The pushing on the boundary is so subtle that you end up feeling like you're mean for holding the limit. And they'll tell you that you're mean for holding the limit. And they'll tell you that you have it wrong. They'll tell you that you're misunderstanding things, or that you're making things up and being too sensitive. And it's easy for an outsider to think, well, the gaslighting should be obvious. But the way the gaslighting works, it really makes you question whether or not they're right. It's around the subtle things, not the overt things. They don't choose the overt things. They choose the subtle things that make you feel confused. Think back to the movie of Gaslighting, where the gaslighting is flickering. She's not for sure why it's flickering. He tells her it's not actually happening, but the subtleties of the flickers are such, it makes her wonder whether or not it's really flickering too. Maybe she's just seeing things. It wasn't like it was blinking on and off. It was just flickering. So she wasn't for sure. She might have made it up. And that's what they move into that. They push into that and make you doubt. It's the subtleties. It's the nuance of stuff that they make you question yourself. Did they really say that? Maybe I heard it wrong. Because how many times have you made plans and you think you know what the plans are, and then you talk back to the person like, well, I thought we were doing this. No, I thought we were doing that. And you go back to the text and you read it and you realize you misread it. You got it wrong. So they lean into those types of misunderstandings to where you question whether or not you really have it right. So that the betrayals are ongoing and the trauma is ongoing. It doesn't stop. It just gets bigger. You aren't for sure what is real. And here's the other piece is, and usually they have now gotten you embedded to such degree, whether you bought a home, you have a new baby, you have a company together, or you put your money together, but there's something that's so now difficult in order to do it. It's going to be a mess to undo it. It's going to be really, really hard to undo it. And you don't want to do that. And this is an antagonistic person who makes everything hard. So to undo it, they're going to question you, wear you down, bog you, do 20 questions, bog it, make it a really tough situation. Mine had an ability to say, when we were finishing a building project, I would say, well, I'm going to do such and such and such. Is that really what you want to do? He'd say. And I think, well, is it really what I want to do? What am I not thinking about that I should think about? So everything becomes just challenging. So as a result, it's going to be a mess. So all of that makes it feel like a mountain, like climbing Mount Everest, the hardest thing you've ever done. So part of what happens with us, with people who are in this, why we're dumping on you, is we're shocked, trying to establish it's real, that it is really that bad. And we're in a state of shock. We're not for sure what to do is what is real, because both realities seem true. We have a good guy who's not good. We have a good woman who's also bad. Both realities seem true. And to get out is going to be so complex and so tough and so scary that we're terrorized. In fact, it was interesting. As I was thinking about talking about this today, I was imagining back. There was a really bad moment that it didn't go bad, but it could have gone bad. And if it gone bad, it would have been a huge insult to me, a real ding to my pride, as if being cheated enough wasn't big enough ding to my pride already. But to me, it was one of my don't do this things. And I was rethinking, what would I have done if he had done that? What if he had injured me like that? Would I had the ability to change the locks on the door, find a way to get the keys and the checkbook out of his satchel, and prepared to lock him out of my life, prepared to risk him beating me to lock him out of my life? Was I in a place that could I have pulled it off? By the way, I was in another country and didn't know the language. Could I have pulled it off, got the doors locks changed, kept him out of the house long enough to have that done, get all the parts and pieces to keep my belongings and assets with me, and not be killed in the process? See, that's what a lot of us are facing, that kind of complication. So, what do we do when that's our friend, our mother, our sister, our child? What do we do when somebody we love is in this situation? The best thing you can do in the beginning is just to listen. Now, I know that's overwhelming because even I said to you, if you heard to me as a therapist, I get overwhelmed by it. It gets very overwhelming. So there's some steps you can do to help. First of all, remember this isn't happening to you, it's happening to them. You don't need to emotionally get invested. I know that sounds kind of cold, but imagine there's literally like a glass of plexiglass, or imagine there's a wall of plexiglass between you and them. So what you're hearing from them is their experience, their life, their emotional reaction. It doesn't necessarily need to be what you feel, what's happening to you. You can sit and listen to that and let it sit outside of the plexiglass that you're living in. That's one thing, is to create a bubble and realize that it is that their pain isn't your pain, that there's a degree of separation that really, really helps a lot. The second thing is to realize that you can listen for their readiness when it's ready. And it may take a long time, that it isn't your life, therefore you're not the one suffering. And it may take years, weeks, months, and years before they're able to get to a place when they're ready to leave. It took me more than a year to be ready to leave. I needed just people to sit with me and hurt with me while I got ready, while I found the energy, that I made a plan. I figured out how I was going to do it safely, or I was ready for it to not to be safe. I had to have all of those things to get ready for it. And I had to wait until a lot of things came together. So sitting and waiting with them with that. And then the last thing you can do is offer to be supportive to them. Like maybe you're the person who hides the extra money that they're stashing away. Maybe you're the person that you admit that they can just call you and just to cry sometimes when it's really hard or it's really crazy making. That you won't judge them. And if they leave and then go back, you're not going to judge them. We all need safe places like that just accepts us as we are. And you can offer that. You can be that person like that. It's hard work. I want to tell you that this is not easy. This is really not easy. But here's what's so incredible. I got to hear Dr. Vessel Vanderklok speak several years ago at a symposium in Washington, D.C. And he was sharing about the commonplaceness of trauma, how 80% of us in the United States alone have experienced a massive trauma. He said that most of us, 60% of us, go on and heal perfectly fine after trauma. It isn't the traumatic event that causes dysfunction. It isn't. Our bodies, our minds, our personalities are wired for healing. What happens is the lack of support. It's the inability to have a safe place to move through the stages and move on and move through them that causes people to get stuck. The 40% probably didn't have a good enough support system, didn't have a lot of resources themselves, and then lacked the support system. So this is what you have an opportunity to really make a difference in somebody's life, to really make a big difference. And this is a way to do it. So thanks for letting me talk a long time about this. I'm going to now turn it over to you, both Instagram and TikTok, to talk about whatever you'd like. Make sure to put a thumbs up in front of your question or comment so I know that you're addressing me. And let's talk on everything related to mental health, anything related to abuse, narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, but anything related to personality disorders, but it also can be related to anything to psychology in general. As you know, I'm a psychologist. So I would love just to chat with you, and thank you so much for being here with me and hanging out and talking about how to become better supporters to those who are going through something traumatic. So, how are you doing? Are you ready for the weekend? And are you doing anything exciting? How do you undo being a narcissist? Oh, that's an interesting question. So remember, make sure to put a thumbs up before it so I know that you're talking to me. And you want to talk about bipolar disorder. Okay, so let's talk about narcissism first, and then we'll jump into bipolar disorder. And what is the trifecta? Chris, can you say more what you mean by that? So narcissism, along with all personality disorders, is actually a disorder. It's a hard wiring problem that people have. They're born this way. The genetics with twin studies show that there's a high rate of concordance between identical twins. So it's something that runs in families. You'll see that it runs in families. There is a biosocial component. Something activates it or is involved with it. But it's not an adverse child theory. So it's been disproved. This is not because of trauma, not because they've been abused, although a lot of them have abuse history, but a lot of us have abuse history. But abuse in itself doesn't cause personality disorders. How can they heal? They can heal somewhat. I mean, it would be like me saying, if you were born without an arm, you can learn to function in the world without an arm. But you're not going to be function as well as you would have if you had two arms. You're going to have to learn to compensate, and that's the same for them. They're going to have to learn to compensate. So it takes. I would urge anybody that you know who has this, that really wants to get better. They need to see a therapist who specializes working with personality disorders and understands that this individual needs a pretty hard hitting therapy that teaches them what behaviors are inappropriate, when it's been manipulative and exploitive, and how to compensate for the lack of empathy and self-reflection. So it's really important for them to have somebody who's able to teach them compensation. Yeah, no, it's not from trauma. It's not from trauma. I know that's popular, and it's very popular in social media for us to blame trauma. It is not trauma. Adam Levine, yes, I am aware of a little bit of it. I have not followed it, but I'm not surprised that we see popular figures in culture to be narcissistic and to do narcissistic and bad behavior. I'm not surprised by that. I had a question came in from a TikTok people. If you're a subscriber, your question comes to the top. So I'm going to jump over the bipolar question to take God Soldier 13. She said, my mom didn't understand, and she was mad at me for not leaving, told me not to be so upset with healing. And how do you work through the resistance? So how do you work through this resistance in your healing? So there's actually two questions came in. So my mom didn't understand. She was mad at me for not leaving and told me not to be so upset. It's interesting. Yeah, that's tough. It's tough when we don't get support like that. It's really, really tough. And yeah, there's a lot of people who don't understand what we're going through or even know how to show up for us. And we end up being gaslit by our support system. That's the scary part, is how often we end up being injured by the people that are supposed to be helping us. So how do you work through the resistance in your healing? There is a resistance. I agree, Brittany, that we struggle with getting better. Part of it is because of fear of change. I think if I was a friend with somebody that I saw resisting getting better, just kind of got stuck, I would say, I've heard you be really mad at him or mad at her for a long time, and I see that you're sort of there and having a hard time moving on. What do you think's going on that's making that really hard for you? And just saying it out loud, identifying it and see what they do with that. That's what I would do. I would bring it to the forefront and see what they say. You might say at that point, if this has been going on a long time, you may say, have you thought of getting some help for this? What I've had to do in therapy, I've had clients get stuck at this stage for such long that I finally say, I've had to say to them, what do you think we're not talking about that we should be talking about because you're stuck in this spot? That maybe it's helping you not address some things that you're scared to address. So what might those things be? And interestingly enough, often they can identify them. They'll often say, I don't know what to do next, or I am afraid to be on my own, or I don't want to be alone, or I have no way to make money. I mean, they'll often tell you the thing that's holding them back, which is kind of keeping them paralyzed in this stage. Instagram asked this question. This new girl I'm dating runs from deep questions. We eventually talk about it, but she causes chaos first. Is that seen as improvement, or is that a red flag? That's a tough one to answer it to be continued. I don't really know if it's an improvement or a red flag. It's a problem if she's creating chaos. That to me is just, I would want to know why she's doing that. That certainly is area for concern, because personality disorders do create chaos. That's one of the signs that you're around someone who may have a personality disorder, is the amount of chaos that's going on. I guess I would ask you this question. Is this something that you could feel like you can live with? Is it going to end up being such a destructive part of your life that it's, you're really, you're not for sure that would make it a really enjoyable high quality life with someone? But see, I'm very serious. If when I approach relationships, I tend to approach it, like I want it to be something, I'm not doing it for fun. I want it something I can cope with, because I view this person as an integral part of my life. And then Liz over on Instagram says, what do I need to prepare when leaving a narcissist? Well, Lizanne, you're going to know the narcissist in your life the best. You're going to know that what you need to do in order to get ready. It may be very different for each of us. For me, I knew there was a level of danger. That meant I had to put my safety first and actually have an exit plan to contain his potential violence. For you, it might be you need to get ready financially, or maybe you need another place. I don't know. So every person, I would urge you to make a list. Identify financial, safety, support system, what you're going to do with your stuff. I mean, just make it very practical. Put it down, and then figure out what are going to be the tough spots, and then what you're going to do to address those tough spots. Yeah, I had to have a plan. I had to have a pretty sophisticated plan, and I think most of us do when we leave somebody who's pretty toxic or scary. So I'm going to jump back to the bipolar question. What is bipolar? Bipolar is a mood disorder. It has usually 2 phases. It's the manic phase or irritable, excessive energy phase. Could be anger. Doesn't necessarily mean happy, or it could be just energetic too. It could look almost like ADHD. And then they also have a real down, flat, blue, maybe even they think of hurting themselves, like what's the point of life, really no motivation. So they go through these waves. Now, for some people, it's within hours. They fluctuate in and out of hours. Other people have slower cycles where it may be days or even weeks or even months. But the best way to treat this is through medication, and seeing a psychiatrist would be what I would urge, and to be medically compliant. It takes really good self-care for you to stay healthy. In order to address it, you need to just stay healthy on all levels. Over on TikTok, can I talk about, my husband claims he'll change and does not need outside support. Is that even possible? No. I'm sorry, no. First of all, he's not. Okay, I'll tell you why it's not, and then you can help me. I think you'll come to the same conclusion. So let's use another outside example. Let's pretend that you're sewing a dress, okay? I'm going to use a very feminine example, sorry. But not all women sew, there are men that sew. Okay, in order, you get a seam in and the seam's not working right. How do you change the seam? How do you make it fit right? Well, you have to rip it out and put a new seam in. You have to know where it's not working, rip it out and change it, right? So if it takes observation, you have to identify the problem, and then you have the ability to change, you have to redo it, make it different. That takes observation. And in psychological terms, that's called introspection or self-reflection. So if I make a mistake, so today, say that I do something, say that I hurt somebody's feelings, and they say, hey, you really hurt my feelings. I have to pause, think through what I said, think through what it would feel like to hear what I'd said, decide what I should have done better, and then know how to show up. There's the empathy part, how to make it right with the person that I injured. So all those steps are required in order for me to repair a relationship. Well, people with personality disorders, particularly with narcissism and antisocial personality disorder, lack empathy. So they're not going to have sensitivity to what the other person's experiencing to even know. They may or may not be able to put themselves into that person's position, because that takes a lot of self-reflection, and they're excessively egocentric, not self-reflective. Okay, so now they're going to struggle to even see what's wrong with what happened. And you're asking them to have a different outcome. How do you do that then? That's why it takes the outside person. The outside person says, this is what a therapist who works with personality disorders does. He said, that's rude. What you just said is rude. What? It was not rude. You're being sensitive. No, I'm not being sensitive. And what you just did is called gaslighting. So let's talk about what you just said and the way that you did it and why it's mean. Let's talk about a new way how to interact when you're feeling irritable with someone so that's not rude. It's brutal. They have to learn new ways of handling how they handle people. And it takes someone strong that can call them out on their bullshit, because they can't see it. Here's the problem with narcissistic personality disorders. Maybe not so much with antisocials, depends on how much narcissism is with an antisocial personality disorder. But narcissists lie first to themselves. They need to be right, and they need to be good. So they're right, and they'll bulldoze over you to be right, and they're special, so they think the rules don't apply to them, so they get what they want, and they bulldoze over you to do that. But they also don't want to be bad. They have an issue with shame. They can't feel bad, so they have to be good. So they're lying to themselves all the time, like, oh, it's not that bad. Here's what mine said. I'm not hurting my wife cheating on her. Whatever she doesn't know doesn't hurt her, right? No, dude, that's not how it works. No, women, if that's you, women, that's not how it works. It hurts. Your partner doesn't need to know for it to be hurtful. And there's evidence of that. If you have an STD and they don't know about it, are you hurting them? Yeah, absolutely, you're hurting them. You're possibly risking their lives. Yes, you're hurting them. So you have to, it takes both. And you're not able to do this on your own. That's why you need therapy. He's bullshitting you. That's what I'm saying. Can I talk more about what causes narcissistic personality disorder? And it's not trauma. Yes, it's not trauma, Jen. What causes it? There's been lots of studies, and the biggest studies that's come out, and there's multiple studies that they've verified these results. They've looked at twins. I think they've even looked at twins raised apart and looked at the rates of occurrence between, identical twins, and it's high. I actually have the rates it's called Concordance, the rates of Concordance. And I think with narcissism, it's like 77%. So they're identical twins. They're 77% likely that if one's narcissistic, the other will be narcissistic. I think with antisocial personality disorder, it's even higher. It's 80%. You can see it traveling through families. If you look at my family, I have a lot of psychopaths in my family. You can see it hopping generations, skipping over and hitting different generations. So it's a personality deficit in the hardwiring, and the imagery of their brains actually look different. The areas that are related to distress and difficulty with feeling like pain and responsibility, accountability is underactive. They don't feel much distress when there's inconsistencies, betrayals, remorseful things, guilty things. They don't feel a lot of distress. It's underactive, that area of the brain. And then the area of brain that has to do with thoughts, mentation of ourself, meditation, it's not meditation, it's mentation, thinking of ourselves. That area of the brain is overly active. That's why they're so egocentric. So everything is happening, they swing it back to think about themselves, how it relates to themselves, whether or not that's fair and it should happen to themselves. Or, say they hear someone's got a promotion at work, they'll end up thinking, why wasn't them that got that promotion? Or what do they need to be doing to get to the promotion? Or that boss has a sweet spot for that person, that's why they got, it's always this focus back to self, this egocentric worldview. So there's actually deficits in the personality that's hardwired in, that's been there since birth. I've heard people describe, in fact, somebody was just telling me that they knew that their family member had issues from birth, that this child was even difficult to bond with. They could see that. I know it's really popular to say that it's due to trauma, really, really popular, but when they've looked and they've really controlled for trauma, this is what they do. So they take a whole bunch of subjects, those who are not with personality disorders, those who have it, those who have histories of trauma, those that don't have it, and then they start to control for all these variables. They find that trauma is unrelated. And even sexual abuse is unrelated. And when you think about it, there's a lot of people who have histories of that, and they're fine. I mean, they turn out fine. They don't have any personality. They raise good kids, and they're healthy, functioning, have good self-esteem, and able to have good empathy and self-reflection. It's not related to that. I think the reason we want to cause. I think the reasons we settle on these theories a couplefold. Predators settle on it because it's a great sob story. Oh, it's not my fault. Somebody hurt me. I mean, that just really plays well. It makes you emotionally responsible for them. Like, oh, then I will be different. I won't do that to you. That's what it kind of pulls that from us. They want that. They want you to be emotionally, because when that happens, then whenever they do something wrong, they can come back and say, I couldn't help myself and you weren't there to help me. They can put all of this on you, which, wow, that works great for them. That really works out wonderful. But also for the rest of us, the reason we like it is that we want life to make sense. We want bad things to have bad consequences. Then it just sort of like makes the world feel controllable, ordered. Then you can say, well, if we just did a better job with raising kids or kept kids safe, then this wouldn't happen. I like that, but it just doesn't work out that way. It's just not the case. So unfortunately, it is something that is kind of a lottery situation. But here's the thing. It doesn't mean that just because somebody is born with this, that you are stuck with it. It doesn't mean, I saw some traits in my children. We're all on the autistic spectrum, and autism struggles with empathy. I worked hard to build empathy into my sons, and they're sons. I worked hard. They're all grown men now, and they're empathic people. They're not perfectly empathic. Well, I'm not perfectly empathic as an autistic person, but they're way more empathic than it would have been if I had ignored it. I was able to get them. Maybe they will never be emotionally empathic, but they certainly are cognitively empathic, very, very much so. Yeah, it's an interesting poll. We just asked who's a narcissist in your life on TikTok, and the narcissist in the life of my live right now is 71% is the partner. It's 71%. Yeah, that's very interesting. Great questions, guys. Thank you so much. So Shelley Bell said, I've been blocked on everything. Should I be prepared for him to contact me, or is he officially done? No, Shelley Bell, they are never done. They are never done. He's blocked you everywhere, and I know it's a he, and I know that people don't like me being gender specific, but in your case, it's a he. But she does it too. She's do it too. The reason they block you everywhere is because they want, this is my theory. I have a couple theories, and mine has done the same with me. I'm blocked everywhere. Not that he has much social media presence, because when you're cheating that much, you don't want your exes finding you, so he's not. Anyway, enough on him. The reason they block you is they want to act like you're so toxic that they can't have you look at their lives, that you can't pull yourself. It's a way to offload the stigma onto you, when really the stigma and the badness belongs to the person who hurt you. So it's just part of their narrative. They've already had to concocted this story about what a wicked person you are, and they're blocking you as a way to bolster this narrative. They have to contain the wild man or woman in you from seeing their stuff. No, it's just a bunch of bullshit. But they also do it because they want to punish you. And they know you being cut off after they have love bombed you and used intermittent reinforcement on you. They know that's painful. It's a very, 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 that you're looking for any connection because they've trained you like that. And now they've cut all connection off as a way to really, really hurt you. So it's deliberate, but hoovering is based on their need, not on your need. And whenever there's not enough supply in their life, or they're between people, or they just got bored, or you're doing really well and they're getting jealous about that, or something happens in your life, they're going to swing back in. Hey, mine did around the pandemic. Hey, how are you doing? And next thing I know, he then types, can you send me money? Why would I ever do that, dude? That's so crazy. So anyway, yes, be prepared for that. Don't think that I wish I could tell you it's over. I wish that. It's not. That's true for everyone, guys. I'm saying this for everyone. It's not over. How long does it take for anxiety to go away if I've stayed for 27 years? Oof. It's not that it won't go away. You just need to, healing is going to have to be very specific. And I would urge you to work with a coach and be very deliberate about the way that you address your healing, for sure. Very, very deliberate about that. Do narcissists change with therapy if they get a good therapist, and is there medication to help? There's not medication that will help narcissistic personality disorder symptoms. There is medication that can help with some of if they're depressed or struggling with ADHD and things like that kind of sometimes go together, that can help them with that. I think you can see some slight changes, but here's the thing. We ask, when we're partners in these relationships, we ask this because we don't want to leave, and we don't want to have to do all the hard work of leaving. And so we're really hoping someone's going to tell us, yes, there is a fairy godmother. And yes, we'll sprinkle some dust in, that's going to be so much better, and you're going to be married to the person you wish you could be married to. No, you're not. No. You may have a little bit of iota of sensitivity, maybe less gaslighting. Maybe they can be monogamous to you, but you will never get a sensitive person who's thoughtful and doesn't lose it. You won't. It's going to be just teeny. So the question for you is, do you deserve that? Or are you worth more? Or would life be better peaceful without this person in your life? I'll tell you, being single has been terribly peaceful. Very peaceful. So it's been so helpful for me to heal. So helpful for me to get my feet back underneath of me. Brittany, I see your question wanting to talk about blocking flying monkeys. Is there pros and cons to it? That's a hard one. When you block them, you're giving power away, and you're saying, yes, you can hurt me. You're so hurtful, I need to block you, which says I'm vulnerable to that. So in a way, it's sort of a reactionary thing. I'd like not to have to do it. But on the other hand, this is what I really think about flying monkeys. If somebody doesn't know you well enough to know the truth when they hear it, or to know a lie when they hear it, they're not your friend. They're not your friend. They didn't know you. And they're not anybody that I would risk, I would trust, I would include in my life. If they're going to take sides, and particularly the wrong side, and when there's abuse, there is a wrong side. They can't see that clearly. Then this isn't anybody I'd really want in my life. Lisa Cali girl wants to know, I have 2 teen sons. My husband's their narcissistic father. How do I explain what's going on without disparaging their dad? Oh, that's a tough one. And they're teen boys. So my advice is what's going to happen is that their father is going to hurt the boys. He's going to step on their toes or do things that are thoughtless. And when that happens, you have the opportunity to say, yeah, that's really tough. I'm sorry that happens. People shouldn't treat each other like that. How are you doing? See, I haven't said anything negative. I haven't said, yeah, that son of a bitch, he's known to do, I didn't do that. I just say, that's really hurtful. How are you doing with that? And then listening and then saying, so what can you do to sort of let's talk about what you can do to present that from happening in the future. You can talk about what options around they can do to kind of protect themselves better, maybe set better limits, maybe to have better expectations, but also just allow them to grieve and process the loss of this idealized, wished-for parent that they don't have, whether it is a mother or a father, because it happens on both sides. So I that's what I would do. Is I would sit there and provide support through their experience rather than getting into tattling on what happened to you in your story. They know, they witnessed it. They know more than you think that they know. Here's an example. I was watching a video training tape of these 2 prolific theorists. They were psychodynamic theorists. And I was in Cape Cod to a symposium learning some in-depth treatment on object relations therapy. And they were sharing a case where they had 2 parents and they were personality disorders who were trying to make a relationship work, and they were having sexual difficulties, one of the issues they were having. And the kids were in the room. Now, they're being very careful about what they talk about so that it was not explicit in front of the children. Would you believe the children acted it out on the floor? They set up a castle, and the therapist made note of it, set up this big building, and then the other child ran the car into the building over and over and over. You get the point? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looked very symbolic to what the parents were struggling with. Kids know. They know more than you think they know. Maybe they can't put it into words. Maybe they don't understand it as an adult concept, but they know. So your boys know. They now need your help to help figure out how to handle a difficult parent. And that's where you being present, loving, supportive, reflective, getting them to think of other options can go a real long ways. Great questions today. Really love it. Thank you so much. I'm going backwards because I don't want to miss some of the questions. I've been trying to take them in order. I found where I stopped. All right. Can I give an example of gaslighting? Yeah, let's do that, because gaslighting is a fascinating topic, something that happens all around us all the time, even in the media. We're being gaslit by politics. We're gaslit all the time. So in simplest terms, gaslighting is the substitution of someone else's reality for yours. So let's use advertising. You're having a good day. You think that you have a great life. You like your car, but you suddenly see a ad saying that, you know what, your life could be better, more satisfying, maybe get what you want if you had this car instead of that car. And you think, would that car give me a better life? Is there a problem with my life? Or how many times do you feel that whenever you go on to social media and you look at all the photos on Instagram or wherever, and you think, am I unhappy? Is this really all that there is? That's a subtle form of gaslighting. And it's a great way to sell stuff and to make you feel like you need something, your life's missing something. But when it happens more deliberately, more in relationships, what's happening is it's usually the person who's doing it is using it as a way to avoid conflict, to deceive or hide something, or just to make their life simpler. A common way we gaslight kids is when they're melting down, we say, can you pull it together? It's not that bad. Well, it is that bad. It's bad enough that they're melting down. Yeah, that's that bad. Now, do we have time for it? We probably don't. That's the issue. So we're really saying, I don't have time for this. Pull it together. I don't want to make time for this. Yeah. So we make it out that they're having an issue. There is no issue. They're just making the issue up. And it's our sense of things is what matters. A way to get around that so that we're not doing it accidentally with our kids is to say, I know this is not what you want right now and you're really having a rough time. Let's talk about it later, but we right now need to get into the car. And I know that this is not the way that you do it, but we need to get into the car. I used to do this. My son could never find the right, like I said, we're all autistic, never could find the right shoes. We'd try shoes on. This is like when he was 3 years old. He'd cry. It hurts. It hurts. He tried the next pair of shoes on. It didn't work. It hurt. It hurt. I had to pick a pair of shoes. His was falling apart. I finally would say to him, okay, of all the shoes we've tried, which one hurts the least? And he had tear streaks down his cheeks, and his little finger would be shaking, and he'd say, that pair. And then we'd buy that pair and walk out. That's the way I got around. I didn't make him feel bad for having it hurt. I validated it hurt. But we still had to buy a pair of shoes. So let's pick the least hurtful pair of shoes and let's go. So that's how you kind of work around all of that. But it gets more insidious. When somebody is when they're avoiding shame, or they're just doing something hurtful or harmful, they'll actually do all sorts of stuff to make it you. They'll deny that this is Darvo. They'll deny it, then they'll attack you, and then they'll act hurt that you brought it up. That's the classic maneuver. But all Darvo is always gaslighting, always, but not all gaslighting is Darvo. I mean, my example with the kids, can we move on? It's not that bad, move on. That's not Darvo. So you can gaslight someone without attacking them and becoming offended, but it is a substitution of reality, of your reality for their reality. And you overrun their reality, so they can't be in touch with their reality. While I'm thinking about this, so I said I'm going to go live on Tuesday with Ben Taylor, Raw Motivation, at 1:00 normal time. And on Monday, just so that you know, on Instagram, on Monday, I'm going live at 11 a.m. with Dr. Christine Becerra. Her and I are going to be talking about the implications of abuse relationships on our well-being. So I hope to have you guys join me for live on Monday at 11 a.m. with Dr. Christine Becerra. She has a wellness. She's a doctor. She's a MD. I think she's an MD. I know she's a doctor. Yeah, I think she's an MD. So we're going to talk about how mental health issues are related to physical health issues and how they kind of dovetail together. So I can't wait to do that on Monday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And I also have a podcast, and a new episode dropped today, and it always is on Mondays and Thursday mornings. So Brittany asked more about the smear campaign. Does all abusers have sexual abuse? No. God's shoulder want to know are all people who are abusive also have been sexually abused? No, absolutely not. They're not related. Yeah, a lot of them have that history, but that's not actually a connection. That's part of the adverse childhood theory that's been disproved. Do narcissists get worse as they age? That's a great question. Some personality disorders get milder, get softer, get maybe even better as they age. It's been thought of, I'd have to go back out and look at the research. It's been thought of that borderline personality types may get better with age. I haven't seen it with narcissism. I haven't seen any change with narcissism. So I'm not for sure there's any connection to that, but that's a great question. What's my thought of autoimmune disease and narcissistic abuse? I think they're very directly related. It makes perfect sense. If you're chronically abused and you're in a state of chronic fight or flight, which means your cortisol levels are high, that's going to cause inflammation, and inflammation is the root problem for autoimmune diseases. So I can see a direct line, but that would be a question to bring up with Dr. Becerra on Monday at 11 a.m. over on Instagram. I would love you to be there and for us to talk more about that. Please be gender specific. In other words, don't be gender specific or be gender specific. Well, reason I'm not gender specific is because here's the stats. 50 to 75% of all narcissists are men. So maybe half, it might be 50-50, but somewhere between 50-50 to 3/4 of narcissists are men. Women, more women are borderline than men, but men have borderline qualities. My father was one, by the way. He had a mix of psychopathic tendencies and borderline features. My mother is the narcissist. So there's right there, breaks your mold. When it comes to antisocial personality disorders, 1 in 100 men have psychopathic tendencies. 30 to 70 out of 1,000 women. So 0.3 to 0.7 women. So somewhere between 30 to 70 women out of 1,000 have psychopathic tendencies. My grandmother was one. So again, I've met the rare ones. I've been on the other end of it. That's why I'm gender neutral around all of this, is because I've known both genders. I've lived around them, know them, have had to cope with them. Yes, I've married a narcissist, yes, and he was a man, but I have been in relationships with both men and women who have struggled with personality disorders. So I'll take this last question and from Brittany, and then we'll have to wrap it up for today, but I'll be back on Tuesday. I'll be back on Instagram on Monday at 11 a.m., but I'll be back at my normal time at Tuesday at 1 p.m. with Ben Taylor, Raw Motivations, talking about the narcissist mind. Why would someone do that? The inside look into a narcissist mind. But let's talk about autism and empathy. So yes, autism struggles with empathy, just like narcissism struggles with empathy. How did I teach my sons to be empathic? So what I would do was they would come home and tell me something that would happen on the playground, or I would see it, they'd do it in front of me. And what I would do is I'd stop, and part of my teaching moment with them, and part of the timeout or whatever it was for the punishment, it might be they had to pay something or couldn't do something. I had to flip it up. By the way, you guys may have found that your disciplines wear out, so you got to always keep them fresh. So I would do something as a consequence, but part of the consequence I would have with them is I would say, how do you think that he feels that you did this? How would that make you feel to have that happen? And I would make them say to me, well, it would feel like this. I said, yeah, it would feel like that. So I would ask them that. So that's one way. You just make that part of the consequence. They have to understand what it's like from their person's position. You can even ask, is that how it felt? Ask the person offended. Tell them what that felt like. Then the other thing I would do is we would use like realism, realistic TV, something that was good for the kids to watch that was innocuous, like Survivor. We'd take, and this is back when I was raising kids, Survivor was very popular. I would pause the DVR, I'm dating myself, and now we stream. We can pause the stream and say, tell me what's happening in this right here. What do you think's going on between all these members? Who's on whose side? How would that feel if this is happening to you? And what would you do if you were in this situation? Just run different scenarios and have them play both, sides and both ends of it. By the way, that's what clinicians do to get better at therapy. We actually sometimes will take a tape of therapy, turn the sound off, watch people's affect, their emotions on their face. That's what it means. Affect doesn't just mean you affected me. Affect actually means what you see on the face, AFFECT. If you see that in literature, we're talking about what's displayed, emotional display on the face. So we would turn off the sound, watch a person's affect, what happens visually, and then try to guess what's going on. Then we'd replay it, listen, and see if our guesses are accurate. Just makes you better at identifying emotions, reading nonverbal cues, picking up subtleties, all that kind of stuff. It just makes you way, way better on that. Well, guys, this has been so much fun. I'm hopping now over to YouTube to hang out on chat while we watch Tuesdays live. And if you missed Tuesday was all about sex addiction, sexual coercion, sexual intimacy, narcissists and sex. If you want to listen in on that, join me over on YouTube right now, Kerry McAvoy, PhD. And otherwise, I will see you Monday on Instagram and on Tuesday at 1 o'clock with Ben Taylor on both platforms. And you guys rock, and I'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.